Hey, welcome back to the Herbalist Hour. Today I'm joined by Bevin Clare. Bevin is an herbalist, author, nutritionist, and world wanderer. So welcome to the show, Bevin.
Thank you. It's so great to be here.
Welcome to the Herbalist Hour. This is where community gather, merging the power of people and flowers, the sweet and the bitter to the salty, the sour. Umami, it's time for the Herbalist Hour.
Yeah, I'm stoked to get to know you a little bit more. I know we're homies, but I have never asked you some of these questions before, so let's get to know Bevin a little bit better. What was a young Bevin like? How did you get into plants? Were you always into plants? But yeah, what kind of like were you when you were younger?
So I was definitely like a potion maker in the sandbox. And
Mm,
I think that's really common, right? Where everyone's making potions and gathering stuff. And I was raised in the country in New Hampshire, but I didn't know anything about the plants. But I'm always surprised that I I paid enough attention to them when I was a child that I can recognize what I was playing with now. Like I now I know what it is and I remember it well enough. Um, so I loved playing with plants. And I think when that brought me to my teens, when we were playing with plants in a different way. And, but I
can't,
remember thinking, like, wait a second. I remember having a very clear moment. I was actually like at a dead show and it was the drums in space part. And I was thinking, if plants can do this, I wonder what else they can do. And I was a
mm.
young teen and that really like lit my fire around learning about herbs. And so from like 13 on, I was super into herbal medicine.
Are you a deadhead?
I mean, not really anymore. I still like it, but like that wouldn't be one of my identifiers.
Okay.
So, but I grew up I grew up in I grew up in New Hampshire at the time when fish was just starting.
Mm.
And so as a teen, like we'd go see fish in tiny venues and that kind of ended up on Big Fish Tour eventually and Dead Tour. And I used to sew patchwork dresses and stuff like that. So I mean, I guess so. It's
So,
been a
um,
while.
so what took you from being a hardcore Grateful Dead fan, Deadhead, all the way to being a hardcore herbalist? You're a professor at the Maryland University of Integrative Health. What was that journey like?
Yeah. So I when I realized I wanted to be an herbalist, I knew that there like had to be a good way to go about it. So I started talking to all these herbalist teachers I had. I'd taken Rosemary's program when I was a young teen, and I'd meet all these herbalists, and I'd be like, "Oh, so how did you support yourself and become a professional herbalist?" And the stories were always like, "Well, I lived in my car for 4 years, and I was selling salve," or like, I lived in this like yurt in the middle of nowhere and hitchhiked everywhere, and I remember thinking, geez, like this is a there's nothing wrong with poverty and there's nothing wrong with like many different ways of getting to your path. But I also felt like this is like a honorable time, time tested occupation or vocation. And it seemed ridiculous that it wasn't one that people could enter the way that people do a lot of other vocations. And I think, you know, there's still a lot of reasons that we might have a conscious mindset around allocation of resources or around accessibility and so on. And like, there's no shame in taking good care of yourself. And so, even at a pretty young age, I was like, well, there's got to be a way to do this. And I didn't really know what it was. And I pieced together odd jobs and so on in the beginning. But pretty quickly I just started teaching about herbs and learning about herbs and then practicing herbs and I also traveled a lot. So, one of the things I got to see was how herbal medicine was capable of providing incredible care in situations where there was no other medicine available, and places where I would absolutely then and now would have sent people to the hospital, but there wasn't an option. So I saw what herbs did, and that really made me super excited to do that. So that kind of started a little bit more of a conventional path. My master's is in infectious disease. I was really interested in learning about how we understood herbal medicine and infection.
When you said you
especially.
started teaching, what were you doing? Just going around the community and teaching classes at like the library, or where were you teaching these classes at?
Yeah, so I took like any herb class. I mean, I was young and like super passionate. So I took any herb class I could find by any herbalist in my area.
Cool.
And I at the University of New Hampshire, they have like the cooperative extension programs for the community. And there was an herbalist teaching there. I actually can't remember her name. And she was teaching like, basic herbalism, like make a tea, tincture, and salve.
Mm.
And I think I took her class like multiple times. And I think I was probably a little annoying and precocious and like very eager because I was like,
Yeah.
and I wanted to help and like volunteer and get there early and like help her unload and like, share all of my wisdom that I was learning from all the books that I read. And
You were one of
and
those.
yeah, I think I really was. And I thought I knew so much about herbs probably too. I mean, I had been studying herbs casually for a little bit. Now I look back, and I'm sure that'll happen, intermittently throughout my entire life. I'll look back and be like, what did I think I knew in my mid 40s?
Right.
But that teacher stopped. She was like, I don't want to teach these classes anymore. You should do it.
Oh,
And
wow.
so that was that. And I think I was maybe 17. I was pretty young.
Wow.
And so I was like, okay, sure, of course I can do that. So I threw my heart into it. And that was the start of just doing a lot of teaching in different places. So it's fun.
I wish I found herbalism at 17. I probably was more, 23, 24, but still pretty,
Still young.
pretty youngish. Yeah. You mentioned Rosemary Gladstar. Who were some of your other, like, say, herbal mentors or inspirations early on?
So Rosemary was a big inspiration early on for sure. And, she would have all sorts of herb teachers up to her place she had the advanced program every year. And so every weekend there'd be a different teacher. And I would say, each one of those teachers inspired me either because I wanted to emulate a lot of aspects of the way that they were and what they did, or I didn't. And I found those two things equally valuable. There'd be people I'd just be like, this is not my thing. Maybe because I felt critical of what they were doing, or maybe because it just didn't align with my philosophies, or both. So, I also studied with Seven Song as a young, precocious teen.
Wow.
I guess must have been trying to think of how old I must have been, 19 when I did his apprenticeship program, and really enjoyed that. And he's been a lifelong friend. I didn't behave very well as an apprentice, so it's good he's forgiven me after all these years.
Sure. So you moved up to Ithaca then and lived there for a bit?
Yep, I did. Yep, for the program. And then at the end of the program, I was like, I'm out, and I bought a one-way ticket to Asia and spent the next couple years romping around, mostly Cambodia, Myanmar, Laos, Indonesia, kind of floating around.
You've really always been a traveler. That's so cool. And I'm excited to delve into more of your world travels later. But I'm kind of curious how you went from herbal student to then, presumably it was Thai Sophia at the time, and then they changed their name to MUIH. What was that transition like? And what was your role when you first started working there? And what is your current role at MUIH?
So I came back from my wild travels, and I guess at that point, I just started practicing. So I was practicing in Maine, and I was practicing in Boston, and I at the same time was doing an undergraduate degree. And I was excited to find a program through Lesley University where it was a little bit of like design your own degree. Like you still had to have your gen eds and stuff, but I could do it in a really flexible way that allowed me to align everything with herbalism. So I did that. And then one day I got a call from, I think it was either James Snow or Kevin Spellman, and they were like, hey, we know you're practicing and have been for a while. And, are you interested in coming down and interviewing at MUIH or at Thai Sophia then? And I was like, oh, I don't know. And ironically, my boyfriend at the time, who I lived with, I was like, do I want to go interview for this thing in Maryland? And we talked about it and decided, probably not, because we probably wouldn't go to Maryland. And he was in at Boston. And but then the next day he got a job offer and an interview asking him to come to Maryland.
Oh, wow.
And so we were like, okay, well, I guess we're moving to Maryland. So I went down and did the most nerve-wracking classes of my life. It was like Kevin Spellman and James Snow and Simon Mills and a bunch of other herbalists. And they asked me to teach about a bunch of things I didn't know about, like straight up stuff that I was like, what's that? Better look that up when I get home and design a lecture on it. And I was so nervous. I remember at one point, I was just so nervous. Simon said, yeah, I think he was trying to calm me down. He was like, so Bevin, what would you say would be your favorite nervine? And I was like, I don't know.
Deer in the headlights.
There's so many, and I couldn't think of anything. Like I couldn't come up with, I couldn't even be like chamomile. So I started there as faculty 20 years ago, which is wild to me. And I was faculty for a while. And then the program has gone through a lot of different iterations and changes. It was a full-time on-site program. Now it's an online program, but I'm currently the program director of the Masters of Science in Clinical Herbal Medicine. So it's our master's that's a clinical one, where people actually building a practice and seeing clients and being supervised using a telehealth model and all that stuff. And it's really, really fun. And I feel like I get to, focus on that vision I had of herbalism being a viable career, not just for students who are going through the master's, expensive, time-consuming track, but like as a whole, lifting up the profession, so that it's something that can be integrated more and thoughtfully into the healthcare environment that we have.
So you mentioned a couple names, Kevin Spellman and Simon Mills. I know Kevin Spellman. I've taken a class with him, I want to say at the Northwest Herbal Symposium. And 90% of the stuff that he taught about went over my head. That's when I kind of knew I wasn't a real herbalist. But I've heard the name Simon Mills before. I was wondering if you could just kind of tell me more about him. I don't really know Simon.
So Simon's like one of the, prior generation British herbalists. And he wrote a lot of like big picture, expansive, philosophical herbal things. I would say that one of the things he contributed greatly was a lot of thoughts around energetics, like in energetic models, particularly in what you might call Western herbalism. So really looking at how that applies so much to what we do. And I think we think about that a lot, but his book, it was called Love is in the Earth at first, and then it was something else. I can't remember what the next title was. And then also Principles and Practices of Phytotherapy was probably the first book I ever saw that was like really truly deep philosophy of herbal practice.
That's cool.
So I think if you study Ayurveda or Chinese medicine, there's a lot of that. But for non-Ayurvedic, non-Chinese herbal medicine, to have like written texts that are contemporary, there's really not a ton that I'm aware of. And so I really enjoyed that, that kind of deep philosophy.
I'll have to look into that. I'm curious if that book is an audio format. Do you happen to know? Okay.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure, but I can try to find a link to it too and send it to you.
Sure. This might seem more like an end of the show type of question. I don't think I've asked anyone this yet, but just you started so early and you seem so passionate about this for so many years now. Would you say like being an herbalist is kind of either your calling or your purpose, if you will?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I can't really imagine doing anything else. I mean, everything else I've done has been a means to that. But that said, like what I would define, my role as an herbalist certainly changes over time. And I think that's one of the cool things about herbal medicine is that you never get bored. It's not like,
right.
Maybe every career is like this. Like maybe if you move from one branch of accounting to another branch of accounting, it's super exciting and different. But I think with herbalism, I mean, you can be like, hey, I'm super into academic writing for peer-reviewed journals, or hey, I'm into like making lip balm in my community, or anything. So I love that it can kind of like grow and change and adapt to what you're interested in over time. Because I think we change too. The way that we view herbalism tends to shift a lot in our lifetime, and how that kind of, I feel like that blind faith and enthusiasm that I had in my very early years was replaced by like probably like too intense of a embrace of science and like conventional philosophy. And then, you realize how limiting that really is, and how herbalism is so much more than that. And so I feel like there's a lot of kind of coming full circle, and it's probably spiraling over time.
Yeah. Are you still into infectious disease, or have you kind of moved on from that?
I'm still really interested in it. I mean,
Yeah.
COVID made it more,
Yeah.
maybe it made it more or less. I'm actually not sure, because I think that there was so much like, oversimplistic stuff that came out with COVID. It was frustrating as somebody who maybe understands infectious disease more than some folks who are coming out
You
with
could
stuff.
say
But
it.
then,
It's okay.
but it's like, but then maybe it's also, everybody has something to offer. Like, you don't really, I guess with herbs, it's like you don't really have to understand science to be able to use them responsibly and appropriately a lot of the time, just because there is, inherent wisdom in plants. Like plants, if you're going to put a plant in the human body, you don't have to know how it works for it to do stuff. And so I do think there's that piece. But I also don't think like, herbs are going to solve a pandemic necessarily. Like we also need other medical tools. So I think that was like a little challenging. But yeah, I like infectious disease because I think that it's where herbalism really got its footing in some ways. And also I think every single one of us is alive because herbal medicine works with infectious disease. I think none of us, without exception, have not had someone in our ancestral line been, their lives haven't been saved by herbs at one point or another from an infection, which was mostly, most likely our demise, whether it was a wound or, a viral and bacterial infection. So I think that that's just so important as humans. Is like we absolutely herbs work so well in this way. And nowadays, maybe that's not the most important place for herbs, but it has been for a long time.
That's so powerful. I never really thought about it that way. And it got me thinking. I was like, you'd think that every human on the planet would be interested in herbalism, but it's not the case, but yeah, I really like how you frame that. So another one of your passions, as I alluded to earlier, is traveling the world. And you actually have a course. I believe you still are running it. It's called Become a World Traveler, which I would love to hear you chat more about, but there's 3 different segments. It looks like there's where in the world, buying tickets and making it real, and planning your culturally rich itinerary. And I was just wondering if you could kind of give us brief synopsis of each one and what people can expect from the course, and maybe like throw in a tip or trick here and there.
Sure. For me, so I've always loved traveling. I mean, it brings me present like nothing else. And I feel like if it helps me to understand both myself and others a lot more. Having children made it even more real because for me, I have these little beings who are privileged enough to grow up in a really safe, loving environment. Like, life coddles them to some degree. I mean, in this day and age, there's only so much coddling, but still, I mean, they're always fed and clothed and loved and warm and blah, blah, blah. And I think that type of comfort can challenge our ability to build resiliency. Resiliency happens when challenge. I certainly don't want to change any of those fundamental safety elements for them, but I love throwing them out of their comfort zone, and nothing does that as much as travel does. I mean, travel is like everything is just different, the food is different and the people are different, and the environment's different and the bed's different, and there's so many things, but you can still be safe and loved. And so I realized how important that was for me to challenge my kids. And so we traveled since they were babies. And I think the kids have been to, I want to say 65 countries or something like that. They've been a lot of places in the world. And people always used to ask like, oh, how do you do it? Like, are you independently wealthy? I mean, that's always the assumption. And I would love to be independently wealthy. It would be so fantastic, but that's not the case. But travel ends up being a real priority. And also like finding, so what I want to do is nothing wrong with like going to Disney or having a nice holiday doing these things, but I want to take some of those families who do that and let them know that for less money, or just individuals who don't know how to travel. Like, you can go to these really interesting places. It can be safe and affordable and doable, and you can plan your own itinerary and you don't need to take a tour. Almost, and just how to do that, like how to navigate that stuff. So that's what it's like. It's about, the first part is like, choose where you want to go. And I really try to help people understand some of the fantastic places in the world they can choose. And then, how to find affordable airfare, which is the biggest expense for most people if they're going to be flying somewhere. And really like solidifying it, because it's very easy to always put it off. Like, oh, someday I want to go to, but you have to take that leap. And usually the plane ticket is like the leap, you're like, whoa, I just did that. And I'm actually going to do this. When you put money on the line, whether it's like buying a house or, whatever you're doing. And then the last part is about when you're going, like how to actually use a lot of the contemporary tools that we have at our fingertips, to be anywhere in the world where you don't speak the language or know anything about it, to plan a meaningful trip. And I think it sounds so overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be at all, and there are places that are overwhelming, but they're few and far between, and you're not going to end up like accidentally in Turkmenistan or something like that.
Right.
So, most of the time it's super manageable. And I just, I just think that if we were traveling the world would be a different place in some ways.
Yeah, you really gain a perspective. I haven't been to 65 countries. I've been to one, but I've probably been to like at least 65 of our United States. So I was going to ask you, the course is evergreen, right? Someone could just go on your website, your website. Okay, cool. So that's bevinclair.com. I want to say it's under the courses tab. You actually sell each lesson individually as well if someone wanted to. But honestly, I was thinking about it, and you could probably, just by taking the course, learn how to get cheaper flights, and the course could almost pay for itself in some regard.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm constantly, people are like, I can't find a cheap flight. And I'm like, oh, you just have to do it this way or that way. Or, there's really good bargains even nowadays to be had, especially if you're a planner ahead. Yeah, I'm happy to help. And so, yeah, there's a lot of very specific, like screenshot videos of like exactly how to do it and find cheaper fares and so on. So
I'm guessing the course was born out of the fact that people kept asking you how to do what you do. Yeah. So any particular underrated or kind of quasi unknown destinations that you'd recommend people check out?
Wow.
There's probably a bunch.
There's a bunch. But I'd say, I'm just trying to think of like the last two places that I went. I just went to Guatemala and El Salvador, and I haven't been to Guatemala in 20 years or something. And that was, I didn't realize what a contemporary, prosperous place that it's become. It still has all of its heart and indigenous culture, but like it's a groovy city too, with a lot of, young art scene and some really neat stuff happening. And El Salvador is just pulling itself out of, one of the most, terrible situations that a country can be in. And it's totally changed. So, I love those areas. And I think a lot of other places that I'd mentioned people would have thought of, but there's, I would say just, I think one of the big barriers people have is they think, oh, I want to go to Europe. So it's like, I'm going to go to Rome, London, and Paris, which is great. But unless you're going to spend enough to go on 10 trips, you're going to be really penny pinching and being very thoughtful, because it's very difficult and expensive. But if you want to go to, Sofia, Bulgaria, and, Belgrade and Eastern Europe, it's going to be a 10th or a 20th of the prices. So a lot of times I like to get people out into different places that they, it's the charm of Europe still, but it's like completely different. And you get, you might not have the Louvre, but you'll find a lot of other gems. And so, having people think out of the box a little bit.
Are any of your travels ever specifically around, oh, I want to go see this plant, or I want to go meet with this herbalist, or is it kind of plant centric, or is it just kind of a mixture? Okay. Yeah.
Well,
I remember. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, sometimes it's like very plant centric. And then sometimes it's like, I'm going to this country now, I want to go see plants and figuring out what's there. But like you might have been mentioning the mountain rose thing where I went to Oman to check out frankincense.
Oh, right. And, totally.
I don't know, that might have been so right. And my family is willing. Like we went to Oman and drove through the entire country to Salalah. We did an 8-day in hotel room quarantine where we couldn't leave the room because of COVID. And then I used like satellite imagery to find frankincense trees out in the desert, and rented a big 4-wheel drive truck, and the kids and I like drove around trying to find these like ancient sacred frankincense trees to hang out with. So yeah, sometimes those crazy botanical expeditions.
Yeah.
Happen.
Yeah, you're right. You did do that article. I want to say that was for the first Mountain Rose Herbs Journal. Isn't that right? Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
The frankincense article. And of course, you've done many videos for HerbRally now with your travels. And, you made Cassia a star on the HerbRally YouTube channel. So, I always have to ask, any particular places that you have traveled to where the food was both outstanding and cheap?
Yeah. Well, it depends on what your version of outstanding is. But, I think one of the coolest places where that meets those criteria is Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is like a clean, calm version of India, which, if you've been, those,
Nope.
those viewers who have been to India is
sure.
like not clean or calm,
Yeah.
but fun. And Sri Lanka, they don't really have a lot of imports. So everything is local, and it's very based around, and even it's cooked on cinnamon wood with coconut
Wow.
husks. Like those are the things they use for fuel. And so there's very little refrigeration, almost none. And so everything is made that day and eaten that day. And so they just make like what you would get for a meal, even out, which would be maybe $1 a person or a little less, is like coconut rice with like 5 different curries. And they're not your kind of heavy, saucy Indian curries. They might be like a lot of like shredded coconut with like some chilies and chopped up greens and all sorts of different kinds of salads, basically. And there might be one meat with it, but they're really fresh and they're really flavorful. They are often very spicy, but it's just the produce there is so beautiful, and the food culture is so alive, and freshness is really, really good. So I think that's a great place for food. Absolutely. Yum.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I think I remember you posting about that on either Facebook or Instagram. I also want to say that was one of the trips you went and visited like a green tea farm. If I was independently wealthy, I think I would invest in Bevin Clare having a Anthony Bourdain type show where you travel the world and show us all of the delicious food that you eat and everything. So I think that'd be a lot of fun. I really wanted to highlight the building resilience in children. I really love that because it's funny, if you didn't, being a dad myself, I'm like, I try to love her as much as I can and provide as much stability as possible. And I'm always thinking like, but how do we create these like opportunities for them to build the resilience and experience challenge? And I think travel is like a really good way because you're constantly outside of your comfort zone. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I watch my kids be able to handle, and it's almost never, dangerous or scary. I mean, we've had a few moments, but like, in many ways, it's just like, hey guys, this is going to be hard. Like, you're going to be tired, everything's going to be weird. This is food. I don't know what it is. Like, whatever it is, I asked if it was vegetarian, and it is. And beyond that, it's unidentifiable, but that's the only thing we're going to be getting for a while. And so there's all these situations where kids have to kind of rise to that. And also it just, so many things out of our control. Like my life at home is so, there's so much, I have so much ability to control what's happening. Like we have a schedule, and when you're traveling, inevitably that just gets thrown out the window. And it's like, well, this wasn't the plan. So we can either get angry and upset and anxious, or everyone's okay. Like, we're all fine. Everyone's healthy. So let's make an adventure of it. Let's figure out, how we're going to do this. And there's been so many situations like that where it's turned around and we figured out how to make the best of things that could have just thrown us over the edge. And I think that carries out into everyday life where you're like, all right, this wasn't the plan, but okay, let's figure it out.
Yeah. Something tells me they're going to be very resilient adults and probably very kind because they've seen so many different cultures and everything. I've met them before. I want to say that was at United Plant Savers, and Yeah, very, very well adjusted and delightful kids. And yeah, very cool. You wrote a book. It's called Spice Apothecary. Did you write that while on the road? I can't imagine that you did that while on the road.
I don't know if I should give you like the true answer now, but no, I'll tell you.
Okay, please.
I mean, I wrote it over a period of time. When I wrote it, I'm trying to think of, so that was like, I wrote it like 5 years ago. So I had I had a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old, which are like pretty needy ages. And so I piecemealed it and wrote it in different places. But the real meat of it, one night, I like left the kids at my parents' house and I went to like a noisy bar and I sat there for like 10 hours and I wrote so much. Now I did definitely edit it all heavily after that, but I had this weird realization that I was always working in all these like quiet environments, which is good. Like I can't work if kids are talking to me or if there's like music playing, but apparently a really loud, like buzzing bar was like an awesome place for me to just work and work and work and work until that place was closed. And so that was, that was kind of a weird thing, but it came from just a lot of long-term love of and thought. It was almost like I had this thing I had to get out. It was like,
totally.
Whoa, this is all in here, and just understanding spices and watching their role in health and the frustration with our disconnect in herbalism sometimes with spices, like how people are like, hey, I heard, this herb is super good for blood sugar. So I went out and bought it in a capsule. And I'm thinking, why? Like, why did you do that? Like, you don't have to take it in a capsule. This can, herbal medicine can be pleasurable and delicious and, sensory.
Yeah. And plus you're spending probably 20 times the amount on just by buying them in capsules. And I know a lot of like the herbal medicine comes from the flavor too. So you're completely bypassing that system as well. Yeah. So let's see. You go over lots of different spices in the book, but we talked pre-call, like maybe about one herb that you want to talk about on the show. Can you tell us a little bit about cinnamon?
Yeah, I love cinnamon. And I think a lot of people love cinnamon. It's one of these, even my grandmother, my in-laws or something like that, who probably I couldn't talk them into eating a lot of turmeric or things like this, that cinnamon is like acceptable. And we have these like cozy associations with it generally, where, everybody loves their spice lattes and so on. But, I think cinnamon is really approachable. It's really, really safe. And there are different kinds of cinnamon. So if you're using cinnamon therapeutically, if you just like to eat it, that's fine. You can use any type you want. If you're using it therapeutically, you want to make sure that you're getting true cinnamon, which is often called like Ceylon cinnamon or Vietnamese cinnamon or Cinnamomum verum, and because it doesn't have the coumarins that some of the other cinnamons have. So long term, it's safer. And but all of that said, I have so much appreciation for, first of all, it's like tree bark, which I think is so cool. I mean, I grew up in North America where we don't really have a lot of spices, I mean, we have a little spice bush or, and you get in Latin America and you get a few, but we really don't have spices. And the idea of like scratching the bark of a tree and smelling cinnamon is like amazing,
Totally.
It's just so cool. And then you can, eat all the leaves are delicious, which we don't, they don't dry well. So, but in fresh, you can have all the leaves. And I also got to see in Sri Lanka people harvesting it and like how that really worked and how challenging and inspiring that was. So I love cinnamon.
Well, yeah, you named your daughter after it too, didn't you?
Yep, I've got a Cassia, a little sweet, spicy. And I didn't even mention like medicinal properties, but now I can go in the direction you want.
There's a whole video on that on the YouTube channel, which we extracted from our Art to Frugal Nutrition module that Bevin actually did. Yeah. Which you can learn more, dear listener, at HerbRally.com/frugal nutrition. There's lots of other modules in there. There's fermentation, there's bone broth, there's dumpster diving, nourishing herbal infusions, and I know I'm forgetting one. Eat Your Weeds with Shayna Lipner Grover. I was actually going to ask you, I don't know if you have any thoughts on other potential modules that we could possibly do where we teach the HerbRally audience how to eat nutritious foods on a budget. Do you have any other thoughts on? I know I'm putting you kind of on the spot right now, but
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be really fun to do some like food desert stuff, where,
Totally. Yeah, I love
looking
that.
at what you can really get when you're in places where there's not a lot of access, and because it's great at those of us who can go to a giant supermarket, but I think that would be fun
Totally.
to do that. And I mean, one of the things that I find um maybe something also around like simplicity of nutrition. Since I travel a lot, a situation I'm often in is I want to make food, but like I don't have all my stuff. And
Yeah.
when I'm home, I'm like, oh, I got all this stuff. So it's like, what can I make? And I find that this is the case for clients or people who want to eat healthy, is like they start with a bare cupboard. And that's really different when you're like, oh yeah, get some ginger and your soy sauce and your, rice vinegar and combine it over there with honey and
Right.
this and add this in, and all of a sudden, to make a meal, they've got to spend $75 on all of this stuff. And so we all know what that's like with recipes. When we open it up and you're like, there's too many things, I can't buy all those things.
Right.
So I think that would be really interesting, is like what's nourishing, what's easy to have when you don't want to have too many ingredients, just a few little things. That would be fun.
I love both of those ideas. And yeah, there's an herbalist named Heather Irvine. And we used to kind of nerd out about, like, say, when we're traveling, what are the healthiest foods we could buy at, like, say, a 7-Eleven or some sort of convenience store, and, looking at labels and finding what is actually quasi edible. So thank you for that. I'll definitely take both of those to heart and, perhaps pursue those in the near future. So Bevin, we've been doing a segment lately called Giving Flowers. And it's just a way to like promote positivity and kindness in the herbal community, or just, the plant community at large. But I was curious if you could kind of tell us about someone you like to give your flowers to, someone who's been inspirational to you on your herbalist and plant journey.
Yeah, I mean, we chatted about this a little earlier, and it's hard, right, to pick somebody.
Totally.
But there's few people that I adore more in my life than Camille Freeman. She's my closest friend. We have matching children. We both got pregnant the first. Well, we did. Our sons are born just a couple weeks apart.
That's
Our
awesome.
daughters are born a couple months apart, and we've traveled the world together in different places. But so I have a lot of appreciation for her in many ways. But one of the ways that I would really note has to do a lot with giving flowers. It's like Camille, I feel like actively is looking for the incredible things that people are doing out there in the world, and developing not just like casual shout outs, but like developing whole structures of acknowledgement that she'll do in her like newsletter and on her like little podcast episodes, or just in life in general. And so, I think that she's really interested in lifting others up and inspiring them to do better, and to be to see all this like good happening in the world. And I love that about her. She's also really, really fun. And I can tell you something she can't do, though. Do you want to know some good Camille Freeman juice?
Yeah, give us the dirt.
Camille is like an incredibly intelligent, amazing person. But when you like blow up inflatables for a swimming pool, she cannot uninflate those things. Like, I mean, she can't, no matter what you do, no matter how patient you are with her or how many times you show her the little valve, she can't do it. So there are even somebody as great as Camille. She also can't parallel park, and I hope I'm not getting too close to home. Yeah, yeah, she can't. She can't. So I think that there's, I'm giving all these flowers, and I want to make sure that people don't realize how human she is still.
Yeah, well, we got to keep her humble as well. So
we do. We don't want her head to explode and her to think, oh gosh, I was acknowledged on the HerbRally podcast, and now I'm, not going to talk to normal people anymore.
Yeah, I'll second everything you said about her. I don't know about the parallel parking situation, but I will say she has a wonderful podcast, as you mentioned. It's called In the Clinic. We promoted that quite a bit at this point. Yeah, it's wonderful. She talks about all sorts of things related to clinic, but just running the business of herbalism and everything. So highly recommend you push pause here and go subscribe to Camille's podcast, In the Clinic. So speaking of Camille, I actually, just like you submitted a question for her episode, she actually submitted a few questions for you, although this does not come in video form. So
Okay.
And there's 3 of them here. So
Uh-oh.
take as long as little time as you need with them. So she actually submitted, I think, like 5 or 6 questions, but these I chose.
Was this like in revenge for my weird question?
I'll let you be the judge of that.
Uh-oh.
So no, they're good questions. One's kind of goofy, but so Camille asks, what characteristics do you notice are common in people who are able to make a living in the field of herbalism? What does it take to make it happen?
So I thought a lot about this because I've watched students for 20 years graduating from this master's program, and I don't think that master's students are any different than any other herbal students as far as what makes them capable of doing this. Of course, you need passion and drive to like push through and to gather that knowledge. But I think what really sets people apart and makes them successful is some kind of niche, like some kind of focus, something that makes them come into mind, whether it's like a healthcare niche where they're like, hey, I work with bunions, which would be a terrible niche. It really would be. But or down to like, it's all about Algerian herbalism because I identify that way and like I bring these traditions to the world, or whatever it is. It's like something that makes them stand out in your mind and something that helps in your practice for people to notice you. So I would say even if you want to have a more generalized family practice or something, to still just pick something and go deep and jump in and put it out there that you really you really know a lot about this particular thing, because there's whatever that is, that particular thing, there's a lot of people that want that knowledge. They just have to connect you with them, and that putting that out there as your specialty like connects the two of you.
That is such a great suggestion. I almost want to say Chanchel Cabrera had a very similar approach to that as well. And yeah, super, super wise right there. So another question is, if you were starting over again from scratch with absolutely no herbal knowledge and wanted to become a clinical herbalist today, what would you do to make that happen? And she says, budget's not an object, and you have 5 years to prepare yourself.
Oh my gosh. Wow,
Yeah.
that is like, it's such a hard question to think about because all of the experiences I have, really shape me. But I think I would probably, I think there's a lot of fantastic herbal programs out there of like all sorts of types. And I think what I would do is I would spend a bit of time focusing on not just like the curriculum of, if I thought of like a full herbal education as like a sphere, that I would think of each teacher in each school as like fulfilling a segment of that, or a little pie chart. There'd be somebody who's like, oh, they're really good at like botany and plant ID and like all of these pieces. And then this person over here is like really good at understanding energetics, and that's their focus. And this person's more into like culinary herbalism. And I think I would find a lot of like smaller programs to really build that up and spend the first few years doing all of these. Like if I have to travel all over the place, or and that could be outside the US too, there's different herbalists doing different things. And then I think I would spend the rest of the time practicing with a mentor. Really try to get out there, practice, and sit in on clinics in different places. Because especially when I leave the US, I meet herbalists in different places. Like I was just at Herb Feast in Ireland, and there's all these herbalists practicing and doing all this cool stuff. And I'm like, I want to come study with you, or I want to come study with you. So there's all of that. And so that might be what I do. If you ask me tomorrow, the answer might be completely different, but I'm satisfied with my answer for now.
Yeah, I do think you're right that one-on-one intern or apprenticeship with another very experienced herbalist is probably a great way to go about it.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, last question from Camille, and she goes, what herb wins the worst tasting award, and why is it saw palmetto?
Because saw palmetto, I've heard, but I don't actually know that it tastes like earwax. I've tasted saw palmetto before, so I'll say that. But if it's not saw palmetto, it's probably bacopa in my book. I think, bacopa is pretty yucky. I'm always amazed when I see students that are like, just have a nice cup of bacopa tea, like in their beginning of their education. I'm like, you go have a nice cup of bacopa tea and you tell me how that goes, but yeah. Good question, Camille.
Yeah. So bacopa is probably your answer. if I recall correctly, I want to say I used to take the tincture of bacopa like when I worked at Mountain Rose Herbs, and it almost kind of reminded me of like this like caustic like tobacco or something like
Yeah.
that. Does that sound about right to you?
Yeah, I mean, lobelia tastes a lot like that too, that kind of
Oh,
caustic tobacco. But I think the bacopa would, I mean, I will revise it and say it's not an herb I use at all, but
sure.
asafoetida, like they use in Indian cooking, would probably be, I don't, it's not even the taste that's bad, but the smell. I mean, I tried to buy some when I was in India once to bring it home to be able to cook with, and I ended up throwing it away. Like
Oh.
I couldn't deal with the smell. Like even though I wrapped it in like 10 plastic bags and like stored it in a jar, it was still just like everything stunk at all times. And I finally just had to, get rid of it. So, and I don't
Mm,
even mind it as a smell, but just I think I had too much of it and it was concentrated or something. So I'll
mm.
add that one in there for
Yeah,
smell.
I don't know that one.
Ferula. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll mail you some.
Oh, please do. I can't wait. Right on. Well, so we'll do just a kind of just random questions right now.
Okay.
I chose this one for you. This is like a common ask an herbalist question that we do sometimes, and it's what does the herbal industry or herbal community need most right now besides more herbalists?
Oh, but then you took my answer when you said beside more herbalists, because, I think and when you
if
say
you
beside more herbalists, do you mean like more herbalists working in the herbal industry and helping them to understand better what they're actually doing?
Yeah, when the
Or,
person asked that question, I believe that's kind of how they framed it. Like sure, the herbal industry, yeah, we need more herbalists. We need more people practicing herbalism. But I will give you a pass if you want to use that as your answer. You could explain why that is, I suppose.
okay, I'll just go with something different because I do think that a lot of the herbal industry out there doesn't even have herbalists working for them. But
Mm,
but that aside, I think that the herbal industry could use a lot more sensory herbalism. Like one of the things
mm,
that really bothers me is you walk into whether it's like Whole Foods or anywhere else and you go to the herb section, nothing, right? Like, and if
mm,
you look around, no plants, like nothing. It to me, and I understand why all of that is the way that is, but like the fact that you can't see a plant or smell a plant when you're in like the plant or medicine section for me means like we're really missing something. And yet you go to other countries and you go to like a spice market or an herb
mm,
market and it's like, there's so much strong scent and you can see all the plants laid out. And yes, there's issues with like quality and sanitation and all this, but there's got to be a middle ground. There's got to be a place where our herbalism can be alive. And I
mm.
remember being in I think I was in Beijing. I think that's where I was. And the hotel that I was staying at was right next door to a Walmart grocery. And that's one of the things I love about traveling. Like I wouldn't normally, travel somewhere and go into the Walmart grocery, but like, I'm in Beijing, so like I should check it out. But what I loved was like in the produce department, they had huge sections of medicinal plants. Like, I would say a third of the produce department was medicinal plants in fresh form. And people buying them or even in freshly dried form, and you see that even in Latin America with like hibiscus and so on. So I think that's one of the things we need, like the bridge between the produce department and the health and beauty aid, whatever department. We need more things that actually bring herbalism into our senses and make it more tactile, and yeah, so that's my answer.
That's really neat. Yeah, no one's remotely come close to answering in that way, and that makes a lot of sense to me. And I've seen pictures you've took of the spice markets you've been to. That just seems like a really fun and magical experience to get to see and smell. Like Amanda and I were talking about like bucket list stuff the other day, and I was like, I don't really have anything like that I could think of. I like my life, like, but really like that should be on there, like going to another country and seeing these spice markets and just really get to experience that. So that's a great answer. We actually have a really great grocery store here in Appleton, Wisconsin called Woodman's, and they have a whole section of fresh herbs. It is in the produce department, but like what was it? I want to say it was fenugreek leaves, which
So cool.
I never had that before, but I was like, I have to buy that and experiment
Right.
with it and stuff like that. So great answer. This is a kind of a newer question from the HerbRally audience. So we asked this to Erica Gallatin and Jim McDonald in a recent episode. And Erica said, she kind of summarized this by saying, step into your shine, which I really appreciated. And the question is, what do you feel that you bring to herbalism that makes you different from others in the community? So it's kind of a moment to like, just kind of brag about yourself, I guess.
Gosh. I mean, I think that I don't know, probably having a lifelong focus on herbalism. Like this is for me, this is where what I want to do. And I want to, support myself and my family well. But I think that the global piece also, like the travel piece is also a big piece of understanding. We all know, like when you meet a plant for the first time, it comes alive, like, that. And for me, I love using herbal medicines I've met in person, most of which I have at one point or another, and I don't make the decisions at this point in my life to like gather everything I use. I mean, of course we play with things out of the garden at our house all the time, but I buy a lot of my herbs, and certainly anything that, for clients or something, I'm purchasing it. But I get to see these things used and gathered and grown in all sorts of places all over the globe, and just there's significance in culture and society that we might not really even think of. So that's probably what I'd do. And I hope I get to take you to a spice market someday. I think that would be really fun. We'd be all blowing our minds and like, it would be really, really fun.
Absolutely. And I've always kind of used, cost or being frugal or cheap as like an excuse to not world travel, but obviously like your whole course is kind of teaching people how to do it on a budget. And that now that we essentially work remotely, I suppose there's essentially no excuse. So yeah, we got to make that happen. I am excited. We're traveling to the San Juan Islands in Washington, which is obviously not another country, but we're going
Beautiful,
there at the end of August for a wedding. So I'm super stoked to do that. But as of now, I'm just like, it feels so good to be like back in a home and just kind of chilling and getting reorganized and everything like that. But so what is something that you like to do outside of the realm of the world of plants or herbalism? And I'm actually going to add something to this. I've been asking this question lately, but I'm also going to throw in, you can't say travel either. So what's a hobby of yours besides herbalism and travel?
Oh my gosh, because travel like kind of like fits, everything. Like between travel and herbalism, I'm like,
who am I?
What do I do? I'm like, well, I like to poop every day. No.
I love that.
What's left? There's probably, I do like to cook, but that sounds really mundane because that's like herbalism probably is. I must have some eccentric interests that I would say that it does have a lot to do with travel, but it's outside the realm of travel, which is just exploring my environment and like getting out there and finding out whether it's like the plants or the seismology and like if there are other fault lines and like what kind of insects are here, and also like the what people's lived here, and are there, what cultures are currently here? And so I like that. I mean, I grew up in New Hampshire, as I mentioned, and I really wanted to live somewhere much more culturally diverse. And, the Maryland where I do live is very culturally diverse. So I feel like I get to have so many different experiences in that way. So it's kind of like traveling at home. But I would say that's a real interest of mine is, people, but people. I'm not even a one-on-one people connecting person. Like I don't like to chat up strangers, but I do love like the feeling of different types of like cultural events and so on. So maybe that would be my answer for that one.
That's acceptable. And, I want to say you were just I'm not like stalking you or anything, but I usually look at people's social media before doing these shows. But I want to say you were just at the White House, which is in your neck of the woods. So I really like the concept of treating your hometown as a tourist would, because then you're able to look into the events that are happening, or like, moving here to Appleton, Wisconsin, it feels like I am still kind of a tourist. So I'm just soaking it all in. But yeah, when I lived in Eugene, Oregon, like that was a fun thing to do, is just treat your town as if you were a tourist. And that's a good cure for boredom. I also got to say, pooping is definitely one of my top hobbies as well. So
yeah, I mean, it's like, what else do I like to do? And it's like PG, so or G rated, so I don't have to get into anything else.
There you go. Cool. Well, now we reached the random point of the show, and this is called Let's Get Deep Friends Edition. Got this deck at Target, so this is just gonna be a random question. I don't know what it is, and we'll both answer it, presuming I have a good answer for it too.
Who goes first?
I always make the guest go first, but actually sometimes I'll buy them time and I'll go first. But okay. You can tell me if you like it. We could always skip it too. Name one thing you've been wanting to do but have been putting off.
It's not really a very good question for me because I don't do that.
Cool.
Like that's not my style. Like if I want to do it, I'm like, it's not because I'm putting it off. It's because there's some immovable object. Yeah. And so, I'm like a very forward moving person. So let's skip that one.
You know what? And I'll probably keep that in just to show that piece of Bevin's personality. And honestly, I'm kind of the same way. I would have said the Herbalist Hour, but here we are. I'm doing the Herbalist Hour now. So I can't really think of anything else besides that. So, yeah. All right, let's choose another one.
Yeah, you and I have that alike, where it's like if they're, I want to go to Iran, but it's just not safe right now. So like other than that.
So there's something called what was it? No, Strengths Finder. Have you ever heard of Strengths Finder?
No.
It's like a personality test. You essentially answer like 200 questions, and it tells you what your top 5 strengths are. And I want to say my number one strength was I took this like 7 years ago. Was activator. Yeah. Which is essentially just getting things rolling and starting. So that it's very much a bad question for me too. What are some nicknames you had throughout your life?
I don't think I really had any nicknames. I mean, that people call me Bev and I immediately correct them. So I think we struck out. I mean, your answers might be a lot more fun.
Has anyone ever called you Vin? Like the back half of your name?
No. And actually, I have to say my children currently have a nickname for me that's a horrible nickname. And I don't, I mean, they like to torture me. So like, that's probably my nickname that I can remember at this point.
Are you willing to share?
Oh my gosh.
And we're allowed to swear on the show. If it
yeah. So this is the nickname. My children are gonna be so excited that this made it out there. Yeah. Because whenever they call me this, I pretend that I actually can't hear them. like they'll be like, "Hey," if they're like, "Hey, Mom," I'm like, "Yes." If they're like, "Hey," and then they say it, I just until they come up with another name. Okay, so this is the name. Burple Blubber Nugget Beef Chief. That is what my children call me at the moment. Burple Blubber Nugget Beef Chief. And I told them I will go with Beat Cheeks because Beat Cheeks, I'm like, that's cute. But it shows you like how well children can like find like Beef Chief sounds like it's like the worst idea. And it just shows you like kids are so good at this, right? They can like find the places where you have the most discomfort and like poke at you. And I'm not really a easily embarrassed person either, which is why I shared that. But I think it's an amazing thing about human nature that they're able to like come up with a name that makes me feel completely uncomfortable. So
that's a good one. Yeah.
Something really embarrassing as well.
Well, no, the first one that came to mind was when I was a kid, my dad called me Moosely. And I've been called May by like when I was a young kid by like my cousins and stuff. But yeah, nothing. Yeah, I'll probably think of something after
I
the
know,
show,
right?
But yeah, Moosely and May have been a couple of nicknames, but
it's not a nickname, but funny enough, Camille and I both work at the same university, and it hasn't happened as much now, but for a long time, people would get the two of us completely confused. Like they'd call me Camille or her Bevin, and this would happen like in all sorts of situations with people that we would know, or they'd, mix us up. And I think that's really funny. And she's not even in the herbal department. So it's like really, we're doing different things, but
totally.
She's
in nutrition department or?
Yeah, in physiology, she loves
physiology.
her physiology. So
totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, right on. Any particular projects you'd like to promote? That's a lot of P's.
Particular project. Jesus, I mean, like what other people are doing, because everybody's just doing so many amazing things.
I mean, for you, any
for me.
any upcoming books or anything like that, or?
No, I mean, I have a book that's brewing, but like it's outside of the genre that I've ever done. I do want to write. Rosemary's telling me constantly, you got to write this book. And she's like, it'll be like a Juliet of the Herbs, Eat, Pray, Love, but like, version around like raising children to have resiliency through, different travel experiences and all of that. So, I think for me, I, as you and probably some of your listeners know, I've had like, crazy health happenings over the last year, 2 of them that are just, random kind of giant balls of shit that have fallen from the sky. And, when you have those things, it just changes your perspective on everything. And you become really, I find myself really grateful for like even the mundane, like even the little things, just like every minute and every moment. And also reflective of like, do I want to change anything? It's like you come this close to dying and then you're like, what should I do? And, to me, I think there's just like a huge amount of gratitude and for even just where I'm at, because like after almost dying and taking a really close look at my life, the only thing I really wanted to do was like buy better champagne glasses for some reason. And like not save the champagne that we got for like a, anniversary present or something. I was like, why are we saving that? Like, you never know. And that was just, it shows like the minutia, like everything else is in place because, I'm always looking at life and making sure it's where I want it to be and doing everything I can within my, power and autonomy to change it. So, I think that's probably like, what am I doing right now? I'm like recuperating from just a really crazy year and just being present and, being like, I have my purpose in life and I have my like community and my people that I love that love me. And, all of these things I want to spend my life exploring and studying and doing. And, that's just awesome. It's amazing. So that's probably my answer of what I'm doing right now.
Wow. Yeah. I was feeling a little, shitty earlier and pouty earlier. So, thank you for bringing that perspective. Yeah. It's good to just savor, the good things in life. And, did you end up drinking that champagne?
Yes, we definitely ended up. I don't even think I ended up buying any fancier glasses, but it was yeah, absolutely. And every day I'm like drinking the champagne. I mean, it's kind of like live like today is your last day, but plan like you're going to live forever. That philosophy, which I really like too, because I am a planner and I do plan on living for a very long time and putting all of those things into place looking forward. But I also feel like, hey, today is like today, and there's not another one, and every minute. So especially with kids who like grow so fast, as you know.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, that is a perfect way to end the show. Minus the part where I should say, go visit Bevin at bevinclaire.com. You can learn more about her books and her courses or her course. bevinclaire.com. And shoot, you're gonna have to remind me of your Instagram handle if you want people to follow you there.
Spice Herb Wander.
That's right.
Same with Facebook. Yeah. Spice Herb Wander.
Awesome. Well, right on. Thank you so much for your time today, Bevin. That was a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Sweet. Heck yeah. Well, we will see y'all in the next episode of the Herbalist Hour. Take care.
Bye, everyone.